Rewatch Podcast presents the Alien vs. Predator Rewatch. Join us each week as we discuss another film in the Alien, Prometheus, Predator, and Alien vs. Predator franchise. Send your feedback to the rewatchpodcast@gmail.com. Join us on Facebook at facebook.com/rewatchpodcast or follow us on Twitter @rewatchpod. Today we're discussing Predators, starring Adrian Brody, Topher Grace, Alice Braga, Walton Goggins, Oleg Taktarov, Lawrence Fishburne, Danny Trejo, and Louis Ozawa Changchian, directed by Nimrod Antal. Welcome back to the Rewatch Podcast. I'm Cory, and it's 5 o'clock. Bitch raping time.
I can't believe you used that line. And I'm Nathan. It wants us to run. That's how it hunts. This is the jungle. It's game. It's rules. We run. We die.
You talk too loud.
I know. How are you, mate?
I'm awesome.
Nice to see you again for another installment of our Alien vs. Predator discussion. We are finally up to the second last episode of our series with Predators.
The final remaining solo Predator film as yet.
Did you get a bit teary at the end? I got a bit teary. A tear ran down my cheek as the credits rolled, thinking, when am I going to see a Predator again?
Shane Black, save us.
Because it sure as hell doesn't happen in Prometheus, but that's okay.
Well, let's check out the trailer.
Let's do it.
What's the last thing you remember?
All of a sudden, there was a light, and then I was falling. Who are you?
I was supposed to be executed 2 days ago.
And I was in combat. So was I.
Black Ops.
Yakuza.
We need to work as a team.
Does this look like a team-orientated group of individuals to you?
They can hear you, smell you, and see you. We were chosen.
Chosen for what? This planet is a game preserve. And we're the game.
They learn, they adapt. You want to survive? Dig in deep.
Who's your daddy now? How do we kill them?
However you can.
All right, welcome back. How about you kick off our trivia this week, Cory?
Okay, so Predators was released July 9th of 2010 in the United States, and it did pretty damn well. It came in at number 3. It was up against Despicable Me and, of course, Twilight Saga Eclipse, which was a absolute juggernaut. Drew in pretty much every single teenage girl, and, you know, you can understand why Predators wouldn't reach number 1 against that.
Yeah, and it did pretty well, you're right. The budget was only $40 million, so they were fairly conservative with the filmmaking on display with this one, and it went on to gross roughly $127 million worldwide. So a reasonable success, maybe not a smash hit home run out of the park, but to be truthful, Cory, it's kind of mirroring more or less what the last few films were kind of doing. Like, as much as I know that we had our reservations about Alien vs. Predator Requiem, it did make a little bit of money, maybe not a heap, but certainly enough to kind of warrant more films and to show that there was interest in the brand of Aliens and Predators, yeah?
Yeah, and I think at this point they really needed to bring Predator back to its roots in a way. I mean, this is a very different story, but it embodies the spirit of that first one, which is definitely really good.
Oh man, very, very much so, and certainly takes it in a very new kind of angle too. So obviously we'll get more into it as we discuss along, but I think this film tries its hardest to put some new energy into the franchise, because this is as much as it's kind of mirroring the initial enthusiasm of the first film and whatnot, it's certainly trying to put a new lease of life by approaching it from a slightly different angle, isn't it? Wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And it's quite interesting looking deeper into this one, because as we know, Predator 2 came out in 92, and 20th Century Fox was actually looking to do another Predator film only a couple of years after that, and they actually hired Robert Rodriguez to write a script. It was like 1995, about the time he was gearing up to do Desperado. So he wrote the script, and of course they went in a different direction. They produced more Alien films and then got into the Alien versus Predator stuff. And then after all that, and they realized that, maybe we've gone down the wrong road here with Predator. Maybe it was time we try to, do Predator again. And when they looked into it, they found, hey, we've got this script that Rodriguez wrote for us all those many years ago, and they approached him, and he was happy to get on board. And he, of course, he doesn't direct this film, but he is very much involved. And Troublemaker Studios, his own production company, produced this film. It was shot at the studio of Troublemaker Studios. So yeah, he was very much involved in this process.
Wow, interesting. And the guy that actually did get to direct this film was a guy named Nimrod Antal. He's actually a Hungarian. Sorry, I tell a lie. He was actually born in LA, but he moved to Hungary in 1901 to study at the Hungarian Film Academy. After graduating, he went on to work in the film and television industry, and in 2005 he actually moved back to Los Angeles, where he made his first feature film in 2007, which was a film called Vacancy, which starred Kate Beckinsale, fresh from Underworld, no doubt, and Luke Wilson, and that was released on April 20, 2007. He actually did go on to make a second feature film in 2009 called Armored. Neither of those films I have seen. Have you seen them at all, Cory?
I saw Vacancy. It was okay.
Yeah. I really couldn't tell you anything about this guy. I know there was a bit of buzz about this kind of filmmaker, so it was a fairly interesting choice. And he actually, in 2013, he actually went on to work with Metallica, no less, and did their concert film Through the Never, which was a reasonably big release, like a big IMAX release, and working with Metallica in like this, their first kind of narrative concert document, not really a documentary per se, but like they tried to kind of install this narrative, and I think it had Dane DeHaan, if I remember rightly. I actually went to go and see that film at IMAX years ago, and it was pretty interesting to say the least. So yeah, Nimrod Antal, he did a pretty good job, I think, with Predators. He certainly did his best, didn't he? Especially with the budget constraint, because it's not like the budget was, let's be honest, it was only made 6 years ago. Budgets were going up and up and up, so $40 million even in 2010. It's a lot of money, but it's not that much money, is it? Not really.
Yeah, and I think they managed to capitalize on filming large portions of the jungle scenes in Hawaii. It was very big on having people film there, mostly because Lost was shooting there at the time.
It's funny you mentioned that, man, because I kept thinking Lost as I was watching this film. It just had the same kind of cinematic look about it. It was very green and lush and really nice to watch.
Yeah, and it mixes it up a little bit from that first one, which was shot in Mexico, which is interesting because, Rodriguez has a lot of ties to Mexico, especially in the films that he makes. So instead they went over to Hawaii, which, I don't know, I think that's actually for the better. It doesn't make it that similar to the original.
In the scripts for these films, they're determined to try and get Big Arnie back and Danny Glover as well. Apparently, in the original script, cameo appearances by Dutch and Michael Harrigan. However, these appearances were ultimately cut out. So not a big surprise, truthfully. I can't even remember what Arnie was doing, if he was still the Governator at that stage or if he had actually come out of that role.
We've even brought this up in some of the Alien vs. Predator ones, that they wanted Arnold back, they wanted Danny Glover back. There's even talks now that this new Shane Black film will have Arnold Schwarzenegger in it, so it's no surprise that they would want it. And it probably just that they couldn't get to it. Maybe they didn't want to do it. Maybe it was scheduling conflicts, who knows. You're not missing a lot anyway, and it would be hard to explain why either of those guys would be there.
They do mention Dutch in this film, which I found it quite refreshing, actually. I enjoyed having that connection to the original film, but we'll talk more as we kind of get into the discussion. Adrian Brody put on 25 pounds of muscle, and to be fair, he does look noticeably bigger. I always think of him as a weedy kind of art house kind of guy. I never really think of him as an action star, and I think he certainly does his best, doesn't he?
Yeah, this is definitely not a role that he is stuck with over the years.
No,
I think
definitely not.
This was, maybe moving away from the more dramatic stuff that he does and trying something different. And I think he holds his own as an action star. He's quite buff. He's a pretty good-looking dude. He does effective deep voice in this movie, which is a little off-putting, but yeah, I think he does a pretty good job, and it's unfortunate he didn't stick with it. Maybe he could have really found his niche in the action scene, but as it turns out, he's just gone back to doing dramatic roles and appearing in Wes Anderson movies.
Well, Nimrod and Tal actually came out and said that Adrian Brody was chosen as the main protagonist, and he says it was actually a challenge in finding a balance. When we cast Adrian, there were a lot of people going, what? But at the same time, if we cast a Vin Diesel in that role or anyone who is Arnold-esque, we would have been attacked for doing so. So we decided early on to go in a very different direction as far as the casting process is concerned, but it actually turned out fantastic. He actually also felt that the shoulders should be portrayed as wiry, tough guys and not burly men like Arnold. And they do succeed in that. You don't really get that buff over the top, gym junkie soldier in this film. They're all, in the jungle, troublemakers, wiry guys, aren't they? So they certainly try and go for a different look in this film.
Yeah, and I think it's for the better. While going through the trivia here, I found this one particularly interesting because I always wondered this, and it's Lawrence Fishburne's character of Noland. They ask him how long he's been there, and he says 7 or maybe 10 seasons or something like that. And I thought, that's a really long time. Like, is that years? But apparently, according to the script, because this is a different planet, they do talk about how the sun hasn't moved for a long time when they're first there. Apparently in Earth time, the rough 7 to 10 seasons on this planet in Earth time is actually about 2 years.
So it's not that long, okay? Because I was a bit confused by that as well, and you kind of got the impression that he was there for like several years. That's the impression I got anyway.
Yeah.
So I think it's more kind of relating to the fact that he's like kind of lost track of time. He doesn't really know how long he's been there, has he?
Yeah, so I was quite happy to find that little bit of trivia there, that it hasn't been 10 years like I thought it would have been. But yeah, it's long enough for him to have gone insane.
As we said, this was conceived back in 94. Rodriguez was initially thought to be attached as the director, but however, within days of the film being announced, he kind of got that out of there, and Nimrod and Tar was announced not long after.
Rodriguez has been adamant that the inspiration for this movie actually does come from the first movie, and he really drew nothing from Predator 2, AVP, Alien vs. Predator Requiem, none of that. He kind of discarded all of that and really just wanted this to be its own original story. He even ignored the comics. And I think that's what makes this movie succeed, is that it's an original story that expands upon that first film in a better, I'm going to say it now, a better way than what Predator 2 did.
Predator 2, if I remember rightly, was more interested in trying to replicate what they did in the first film, and then they tried to differentiate the film by just giving the Predator some new toys and some new weapons and all that kind of stuff. And this film in particular doesn't seem as interested. All the weapons have kind of already been set up. It's more about the hunt and kind of how they're going to get this group of people, and doesn't seem to be too concerned by all the gimmicks that the previous films have put into place. It's just more about the Predator just doing what he does best, and being a predator, a hunter.
It's very refreshing. It's what I've been saying about the Predator since we finished Predator 2, is like what we really need is more motivation for why the Predators do what they do. And that's what this film is definitely aiming at.
According to Nimrod Antal and Robert Rodriguez on the commentary track, in the script, the character Cachillo was described as a guy who looks like Danny Trejo. So apparently when Danny Trejo heard this, he actually called Robert Rodriguez and said, "Hey, I heard there's a guy in the script for Predators who just looks like Danny Trejo. And guess what? I look like Danny Trejo." So I thought that was pretty funny. And truthfully, not that surprising when Danny Trejo heard that. So
yeah,
he's quite tight with Robert Rodriguez. He's appeared in, obviously, the Machete spaghetti films, and I think he's been a fairly, like a bit of a regular for him for many years now. So yeah, it's kind of good to see him pop up. I quite like Danny Trejo. It's good.
Yeah, exactly. He was in From Dusk Till Dawn. He was in Desperados. Even though this isn't directed by Rodriguez, he is involved. So yeah, you got to throw Danny Trejo in there. Come on. Why not?
Definitely. All right, shall we get into the feature discussion?
Let's do it. It's like I said, this one really takes it in a different direction. In that, you know, it's still predators hunting people in the jungle, but this just starts so strikingly. Adrian Brody's character just free falling into this jungle. He's just woken up from unconsciousness and suddenly realizes he has to open a parachute or else he's going to die. It is a fantastic opening.
It's a pretty bold opening, and it certainly grabs you like immediately. I certainly wasn't expecting it either, because as I mentioned to you last week, I don't remember seeing this film. This film came out 6 years ago and it just passed me by. I never watched Predators. I watched it the other day and it immediately hooks you. So, you know, you're dead right. We meet Adrian Brody's character, whose name I will not mention until the end of the episode, Corey, and he's parachuting and wakes up and he freaks out and falls to the ground and soon realizes that he was not the only person parachuting into what they don't really know where they are or what's happening. It's a fantastic opening. It's certainly bold and very different, isn't it?
And you know something else I found very refreshing, especially after the last 2 weeks? Because for the last 2 weeks, what have we been saying about the human characters? We don't give a shit. We don't give a shit what their plans are, what they're doing.
I know.
I don't even care what their names are. They could really give pretty short shrift to any of these characters' names or anything like that. And as you mentioned, they don't even tell us what Adrian Brody's character's name is until the very end of the movie. Because you know what? It doesn't matter. It does not matter.
It doesn't matter, but it's also a bit of a thing throughout the whole film. Like there's several instances through the film where they try and ask him what his name is, and he's like, "What's the point, man?" Like, you know what I mean? Like there's that kind of discussion kind of going. Like there's no use talking about this kind of stuff, you know. And it does get revealed right at the end, but that's okay. We meet Mexican drug cartel enforcer Cachillo, who is the Danny Trejo character, which we mentioned, Nikolai, Isabel, Mombasa, death row inmate Stan's Yakuza enforcer Hanzo, and a general practice doctor Edwin.
It's an interesting part for Topher Grace, I think. It's just, yeah, you know, as they band together, and of course, like, some of them are fighting with others and they're shooting at each other, but they come together because they realize that they've all just been dropped here. And it takes a while, but eventually Adrian Brody, he approaches Isabel and says, look, you know, these are all really bad people, all of us. And it's probably the reason why we're here. And the only one who doesn't match is Edwin. He's a doctor. And I think the reason they make him a doctor is to mislead you. Like maybe the Predators sent them a doctor because they're going to need a doctor at some point. It's a slow burn for his character, but we'll get to the reason why he's actually there. But it's a fascinating group.
Yeah, and it's ultimately like a mystery. It feels like a mystery. And I think you can kind of feel the $40 million budget kind of creeping in as well. Like I think they've done a really good job using the money that they have and making a really effective science fiction mystery. For 3/4 of the film, it is a science fiction mystery. And don't get me wrong, there are predators in there and the predators are hunting away, and there is a whole lot of action in this film as well. But I mean, this film cannot afford 20 action, ginormous set pieces and thousands of, you know, VFX in every single shot. So they do, like, you know, you're dead right. Like in the previous Alien and Predator discussions, we've been saying that we haven't cared at all about the characters whatsoever, but this film forces you have to care about the characters, because if you don't care about them, the film doesn't work. And I think they do their best. So you're right, we meet Brody's character and he hooks up with Isabel, or, you know, he's talking to her, Isabel, I should say. And Isabel actually suspects that Brody's character is a former black operation soldier turned mercenary. So they're cruising through the jungle with Brody's character being almost like the leader, the default leader, in saying that no one really chose him. Is that like it just kind of happened by proxy almost? Yeah,
he kind of just establishes himself as the alpha dog, which is rough thing to do, because really these are a group of just bad people who don't give a crap about anybody else, but here they are kind of forced together. And yeah, he kind of just says, look, if you want to survive, come with me. If not, just do whatever you want. I don't care. Follow me because I'm going this way.
But in saying that, though, he's cranky about having to lead everyone. He doesn't really want to. He says once or twice through the film, he said, this would be much easier by myself. I'd much rather be alone than kind of leading all these people. And there was a scene where they're leading their way through the jungle, and I think Isabel says to Brody, can we just stop and just take a break? And he's like, well, if you want to stop, that's fine. But I'm, like if you want to follow me, that's fine as well. But I'm not going to, you dictate kind of how we do this. And he just wanted to kind of keep going, yeah.
And this is where I think they quite successfully make this film seem a lot grander than it actually is. Because for the most part, they're just trudging through the jungle. But they throw in this whole thing about how she makes a compass, just by putting the pin on the leaf and it just starts spinning around. She's not familiar with the jungle. He says the sun hasn't moved since they've been there. And then we just get this one shot of the sky. Hey, we're on a different planet, and that just immediately makes this a bit grander scale just from that one simple effect shot. It sort of just makes this whole thing seem a lot grander, even though, yeah, they are limited by a fairly small budget by any standards.
From my point of view, when I'm watching it and I saw that they're on another planet, you kind of just think, how the fuck are they going to get out of this, man? Like, seriously, like, what's going on? I mean, is there an exit from this film? Is there a happy ending in this film? It certainly doesn't kind of feel like it, because the ragtag group in particular, Walter Goggins' character, the rest of them you can kind of tolerate. It just feels like most of them are just soldiers, just being soldiers. Yes, they're bad people. For some reason, we get the Walter Goggins character in there as well, who is just trying to stir shit up. It sounds like doesn't he say that he was on death row and he was meant to be executed in 2 days or something like that, and for whatever reason he found himself on this planet. And it wasn't there that one scene too where he's trying to like desperately plead with the guys as well, like, you've got to give me a gun, you have to give me a gun, and they just refuse to for whatever reason, because this guy's a psychopath. And it's an interesting group of people they've got together. And so something I was slightly concerned about before we had this discussion, Cory, was when I was watching this, I was a bit concerned about our plot synopsis, because there isn't a lot of plot, truthfully, apart from it's a ragtag group of people traveling through the jungle and this stuff kind of happens. Yeah, like, wouldn't you say?
It's like where they're going. Like, once they reveal they're on another planet, it clicks over what's happening here. Rather than the Predator coming to Earth and being in an Earth jungle hunting mercenaries, they've actually gone to Earth and abducted a bunch of the worst people, the greatest hunters they could find, and brought them to their jungle in order to hunt. It's a stroke of genius, in my opinion. I think it's just a great little subversion of that first movie. Same thing, but different,
Oh, totally. It's totally different. The party's actually attacked by a pack of alien beasts. They were dog-like creatures, and they were pretty nasty, weren't they?
Yeah, it's a great little touch on the hunter aspect of it, And Brody's character comes in and says, like, this, they're hunting us. Like, this, they've given themselves away at this point. I know they're hunting us because they sent in the dogs, they saw how we reacted, they watched, they learned, and now they know our strengths and weaknesses. So, this is just information for their hunting databanks, if you will.
All right, listen up. Everybody do a shell count.
Excuse me. I'm just, what the hell is going on here?
You're being hunted. The cages, the soldier, all of us. We're all brought here for the same purpose. This planet is a game preserve. And we're the game. In case you didn't notice, we just got flushed out. They sent the dogs in, just like you would if you were stalking boar, shooting quail. They split us apart, and they watched, testing us.
How do you know this?
Because that's what I would.
So pretty early in the film, we get our first kill, which is Danny Trejo's character, Cachillo. He's killed, and his body's then used as bait to actually lure the survivors into a trap, but they actually avoided it. It's something that I quite enjoyed in this film was the traps that the Predators had set up to get the people. I thought they were very elaborate and very clever and very well put together. I did quite enjoy just how ingenious the group of men and women had to be to avoid these kind of traps. And truthfully, a few few of them kind of didn't really avoid them and they got killed. But death was not far away on this planet, was it? You really had to have your wits about you, didn't you?
We did talk about this in the other Predator films, the fact that they sort of introduce new toys. And they do that in this movie too. They have these like scout drone things that kind of look like an eagle or something like that they send out as like a surveillance equipment or something like that. You know, just a little touch like that, you know, just keep with the spirit of those first two movies, I guess, really.
It's not laboured on, though, all the new stuff. Like at the end of the day, you're there to follow, you know, Brody's character and Isabel's character, and those are the people you want to survive. Yes, it's about the Predators as well, but you don't labour on all the new tricks that they have. Other than that, like they've still got the heat vision, and they can adjust kind of the way they see, and obviously they can camouflage and all this kind of stuff. And it kind of drives the group crazy for a little while because they have no idea exactly what happens.
And I love the look of the new Predators as well, because at this point we get a taste of it, and they seem actually larger than the original Predators. And I think being that this is quite possibly their own planet, or a planet that they use specifically for hunting, it's like they've been there a really long time. They've taken trophies, and like that one leader has like that jaw across the bottom of his facial mask and stuff like that. Like, they've been out there doing this hunt for a long time. They get sent things to hunt, and they go out and they hunt it, you know. I really love that little touch of these seasoned hunters who are just in for another round of hunting.
Total experts, total badasses. You wouldn't muck around with them at all. I agree, man. I really liked the differentiation between the different Predators, and you're right with the trophies and kind of like the experience that they kind of shown, and how their different helmets look slightly different from one another, and kind of gives them all this fairly disparaging personality from each other. It's quite interesting the way they've tried to make the Predators more interesting as we keep watching more films. So yeah, and here we are now with the last Predators that we have, and I know that they're making another film. It's like a whole new thing with Shane Black directing, so it'll be interesting to see where they go with that. And I will say too, like, I'm really pleased that the brand is continuing, because the Predator is such a cool idea. The way he hunts, kind of stalks people, and has this personality, and I think it's great, man. And I think that visually it's, I mean, in 1987 it looked great, and in 2010 it looked just as good. So yeah, I'm pleased that they're kind of soldiering on with it.
And they've individualized them, you know. There's more than one Predator here, and they're all their own character. You could say, like, the first two Predators from Predator 1 and 2, they were the same Predator. That was even the same actor in the suit, you know, even though that first Predator died. And they kind of stuck with that. They changed it up a little bit for the Alien vs. Predator movies. Still ostensibly the same character, even though it's supposed to be a different Predator. And this one really just says, look, there's more than one Predator. This is a species of Predator. And just like people, they've all got their own different look, their own feel, their own actions. And that's what this movie does. It's got a group of them and individualize them all, which is just fantastic.
The group actually follow the tracks back to a camp and actually find a captive predator. And they actually realize that the hunters is actually 3 larger predators, and they actually end up attacking the group, and we get another kill here, Mombasa, but the rest of the group escapes. Isabel, she's really pissed off with Brody's character, because she realizes that Brody is not really telling all the truth, and actually says to the rest of the group, you should be pissed off with this guy right now because he just used us as bait. And Brody actually says, well, actually, yeah, you are right. I did use you as bait, but I had to know what we were up against, because up until that point, they didn't really know where they were or what was happening or anything was kind of going on. And now all of a sudden, Brody realizes that they're up against a predator who can camouflage himself, and we can't see him, but he's very, very experienced and is going to be very difficult to kill. But the group is really pissed off that one of the guys got sacrificed. It doesn't end there, because Brody actually confronts Isabel and actually says, well, she's not everything she's saying to be either, because the way she reacted to one of the kills, she wasn't really freaked out. She clearly knows who this is. And then it turns out that Isabel actually reveals that she is very familiar with a story from Guatemala in 1987. And that's when she starts talking about Dutch. And in his description of the alien-like creature, it sounded very familiar to what she saw back at the camp with the captive predator.
The use of the quote-unquote classic predator being tied up the way it was, you know, it's also a reveal that there's some sort of blood feud going on here. And that story gets strengthened when they run into the Lawrence Fishburne character, Noland. He fills them in on some of the gaps.
I can hear you. They can too. Storm coming soon. This way.
Wait. Who are you?
I'm the one that got away.
I quite liked his introduction. I didn't expect it. Him kind of essentially masking himself as a predator, and I didn't really see that coming. And when he took off his helmet, I expected to see Predator underneath it, but no, it was Lawrence Fishburne. I didn't know he was in this film, and to be truthful, I did have a bit of a spoiler alert before I realized he didn't show up until about 40 minutes into the film. And sure enough, 40 minutes rolls by and Lawrence Fishburne shows up. It's like, okay. And he plays a bit of a nutbag. He's like a lone soldier who's kind of survived on the planet for 10 seasons by hiding and scavenging pretty much anything he can in any situation that kind of presents itself. He also very clearly has mental issues. He's talking to someone, isn't he, that's not there.
He's obviously been through some shit.
Oh yeah, of course.
He's obviously killed some predators because, well, he has the mask, he has the cloaking device which he used. So yeah, man, he's survived. He's been out there, but yeah, he's lost it. He's speaking to someone who isn't there. They don't quite know how to deal with it, but hey, this guy survived that long. We better stick with him. And I thought it was a cool callback to the first film as well, because like you said, there's this cloaked figure and you just assume it's a predator, and he says, "Turn around, over here." Just like from the first movie. I thought that was a cool little callback as well. But yeah, they follow him and he's camped out in this crashed predator ship.
Gorgon's character sort of says, "This place is a shithole, man." Or something like that. And Fishburne saying, "Well, you know, this is just my winter place. In summer, I have another place down the river. The schools are better down there." It's clearly taking the piss of him, you know?
Yeah. This gets back to that Walton Goggins character. Stans. It's so weird that he is the comic relief in this movie. He's the worst of them all. I mean, they're all killers and mercenaries and stuff, but this dude's probably like a convicted murderer. He's clearly a rapist. He talks about raping people all the time. And in this scene, he's got a tattoo of a very busty woman on him, and he's talking about how good her tits are and stuff. But this is, oh no, it's my sister. It's so weird that he's the comic relief, but it's funny.
Yeah, I'm not too sure how funny it was, truthfully. I didn't really like him that much. I mean, obviously you're not meant to like him. He's a bad guy. It is something that I will kind of, and probably a good time to bring it up, is the casting in this film. Like, as much as I liked the movie, and I do like it, the casting, like Adrian Brody, like, I don't really think of him as an action hero, and as much as he kind of does well in this, I'm not too sure he was entirely convincing. Like, in a perfect world, I would have loved to see like a Sly Stallone or something like that. I think that would have been a great twist. It would have been really cool having Arnie in the first film and Sly Stallone in this film playing that role. And you know what? He could have played that, and it would have been really, really cool, and probably would have made a lot more money than it did, and spawned a few more sequels of this storyline and whatnot. But Brody, he's good in the role, but I wouldn't say he's great in it. The Walton Goggins character, like, I just know him from The Shield, and The Shield's a wonderful show. And the fact that he's like this comic relief in this film, it's a bit strange, and I'm not sure it sat all that well with me. And you have that sequence where he's talking to Topher Grace, and he just doesn't know how to react.
I don't know. I find it maybe morbidly funny. Maybe it's just my dark side coming out. I like the jokes.
Fair enough.
But yeah, it turns out, of course, that Nolan has pretty much just lured them into a trap. You know, this is how he survives, is that he just gets as much weaponry and whatnot as he can. He doesn't care who he has to screw over as long as he can survive. And that's a pretty cool turn of events. And I read that Lawrence Fishburne only worked 2 days on this movie, so he's definitely not in it that long. But yeah, I mean, this doesn't turn out well for him, of course. He gets blasted by a predator pretty quickly when Brody he says, "I'm calling in the cavalry," by creating an explosion. And yeah, sure enough, predators show up and they kill Nolan. And yeah, you know, they have this kind of like escape sequence where Edwin, Topher Grace, is cornered by a predator, but then Nikolai comes to his rescue, and then Topher Grace is just like out of there. He's like, this guy came to your rescue, but he's not going to sacrifice himself to save him now. It's a pretty cool sequence.
One thing I will say, man, I'm liking in the synopsis that they haven't given the predators names. I'm so pleased I'm not reading about predators in terms of like, and we've got, you know, flood over here and hurricane or whatever it might be. Like, it's just the predator.
So Jaws shows up.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah, well, they escape the ship and they're immediately confronted by a predator. And again, this is kind of just a funny gag with the Stan's character, because this is where he gets off.
Before we go too far, let me just say right now that the overriding kind of end game for the film is kind of revealed slightly, where Brody decides that, okay, there's got to be a way. If we can get on this planet, there's got to be a way off this planet. How about we try and get to the Predator's spaceship and try and navigate it out of here somehow? And they do make that reveal in this exchange with Nolan.
Stans has this whole thing about wanting a gun. You mentioned it before. He wanted a gun. They don't give him a gun. He's actually pretty handy with a shiv. He gets one of those dogs earlier. And at this point, yeah, he gets blasted by a predator and then immediately gets back up and starts shivving the predator as the rest of them run away.
You don't expect it either, because you think he's dead. You think
Exactly.
he's gone for whatever reason. You can find that extra energy to kind of shiv this guy to death. And
yeah.
So I think at this stage we've got two of the, because there's three larger predators, I should say, that are on the run and trying to kind of attack this kind of group of people. And I think two of them are gone by this stage.
Well, there's that one that gets taken out with Walton Goggins, and then we immediately get to this duel with Hanzo, because on Nolan's ship he finds this ancient samurai sword and says this has been here a long time, just to sort of strengthen that thing about how long the predators have been doing this. But yeah, he's got this katana now, and he's like the Billy character from that first one. He kind of stands his ground and decides, all right, predator, let's do this. Let's battle our swords. And it's a pretty decent fight. I like it, just this. He's got the samurai sword, the predator's got those blades that come down from his arm, and they both fight and they both die.
And once again, we kind of come back to the predator having a code. I mean, the predator could have taken this guy out at any stage with kind of a weapon or something like that, but he chooses to fight him on his own level with a sword and actually, try and beat him like an honourable way. I've always kind of got that impression whilst watching these films that obviously the predator will kind of do anything it can to take someone out, but I think ultimately what's important to them is that they do things the right way. I like the fight. It felt a little tacked on, and it went for a while. Maybe wasn't all that necessary, but they certainly did their best.
That's exactly right. That's why I appreciated it. It's like the predator showed up and he could have just blasted Hanzo away or whatever. But he's there, he's got a sword, he's ready to fight. The predator's just like, sword fight. All right, let's do this.
Let's do it, yeah.
And yeah, it is. It's that hunter's code. Like, I'm going to fight you on your level, on your terms. These are the terms you've laid down. Let's do it.
So Edwin is actually injured by a trap, and there's that scene there where it's actually pretty good when Brody says to Isabel, right, he's done. He just looks at Edwin and just says, you're done, man. Like, that trap is not designed to kill you. It's actually designed to maim you. They want you to be injured, and you will just slow us down, and then there'll be an incident. We're done. He's like, oh man, I can walk on it. I can do it. And he tries to stand up and realizes straight away that he can't. Isabel actually refuses to actually abandon Edwin, and he actually sticks with him, which is a big fat mistake. She should have run away.
Well, you figure that Brody is just going to abandon them, because he has this whole idea that if he cuts down that predator that they've got tied up, he goes with that line, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, which, yes, is from that first Alien vs. Predator movie. Can't help but think of it. I don't know, it kind of makes sense. And yeah, so you got Isabel and Edwin thrown into the pit, and you think Brody's getting away with the classic predator, but then that final remaining massive predator shows up, and we get a bit of a duel, this finalization of this blood feud that's going on between them. And the larger predator takes off his mask, and man, he looks significantly different.
Massively different. And the fight between those two guys is brutal, and it ends pretty dramatically. The larger predator kills the smaller one and destroys the ship as it takes off. And it does a bit of a movie furphy there, where you actually think that maybe Brody was on that ship as it takes off, and it blows up, and you just go, oh geez Louise, that's it for Brody. Yeah, well, that's what I thought anyway. Did you have the same thought?
Definitely. The first time I was watching this, I was a bit like, oh geez, I thought he would be the person to see this right through, but hey, maybe it's Isabel. But, in the meantime, they're down in this pit, and Topher Grace reveals himself to actually be a serial killer. And this is why the Predators have chosen him, because he is a killer, just like the rest of them. He just hides it a lot better than anybody else. And he actually wants to kill Isabel in probably a strange attempt to try and impress the Predators, maybe get on their side. He wants to stay there and be a part of their hunt.
Thank you.
When the time comes, I'll do us both. I promise you it'll be quick.
No. It won't. Oh. That's right. It's a neurotoxin. There's so many to choose from around here. Well, don't worry. It's not fatal. You'll be able to experience everything. I guess now you realize why they chose me. I was right in front of you guys the whole time. Just watching you. Earning your trust. You couldn't see me for what I really am. You see, back home, I'm a murderer. I'm a freak. But here, among the monsters, I'm normal. I like it here. I want to stay.
Oh, you came back.
I missed my ride.
Oh, thank God. Help us get out of here.
Brody he doesn't overhear this. He actually helps them out because he shows back up. He's not dead.
No, he's not dead. And he's shirtless all of a sudden, isn't he, too? Showing off his new body that he has got for this film, so which I found quite funny because he wasn't shirtless before he ran away.
Edwin tries to go for him, but he doesn't fall for that shit. And so Edwin's secret is out now, and this gives him license to booby trap him and do what the Predators tried to do at the beginning with Danny Trejo, pretty much. Rig him with all these grenades, and when the Predator shows up, and it's kind of brutal because like the Predator just like stabs him through the back nice and slow like that. You're just like, oh, this is fucked up. And yeah, sure enough, he's got all these grenades attached to him, and yeah, now it's on. Brody's gonna go fist to fist with the Predator,
and he does, and he holds his own, doesn't he? Like, and it's a pretty good, very cinematic fight sequence towards the end of the film. Something I will say, man, I think the action in this film is pretty effective. It certainly held my attention, and I always knew what was going on. I never lost track of like who was who, or where was the Predator, or who that guy was, or whatever it might be. I thought most of the action in this film was fairly well designed. The fight sequence was well designed, and it captured my attention. I appreciate a good action sequence that tells the viewer exactly what's happening at all times, and I think this film does that.
He'd figured out the heat vision by that point, so he surrounds the whole camp in fire and everything, so the Predator doesn't quite know where he is at any time, and he's beating him down.
There's a great scene where the Predator's kind of cycling through his vision and seeing if there's like one of his visions that kind of see past the disruption that Brody's created. He can't get past it, can he?
Yeah, for all his technology, it's just not working, and he gets the upper hand on him, and yeah, he gets the same fate as the classic Predator. He gets his head cut off. And that's pretty much the end of the film. We do get the reveal that Brody's character's name is Royce.
Royce. I can't believe we kept that from our podcast audience for the whole synopsis. I kept kind of beating around it, just calling him Brody's character.
Yeah.
Royce.
But he's Royce. She's Isabel. Let's find a way off this fucking planet. And that's how it ends.
And meanwhile, we should mention too, just before that happens, they notice that there are more parachutes opening on the planet, clearly setting it up for some kind of sequel. So you're right. Royce surmises that there'll be more predators that will arrive soon to hunt the new prey. A good film. So for you, Cory, what's your ratings recommends on this one?
Well, I really loved this movie. It pays homage to the original without copying it too much, and it's like I said, it's the original film, but done in a very creative new way. And I love that. I really do. So I'm going to give this, I'm pretty sure I gave that first one a 10 out of 10. I thought it was a pretty damn good movie. And this one's right up there with it. So I'm going to go with, let's say 9 parachutes out of 10.
I'm with you on this. I don't know if I love it quite as much as you. I think I'm shooting towards like a 7.5 to 8 Lawrence Fishburnes. My only criticism of the film is I kind of wish the premise for this movie was kind of turned into some kind of TV show, like a 10-part TV show, and I got to know these characters a little bit more, because the film expects you to kind of learn and like these people, or maybe not like is the wrong word, but certainly get to know them. And some of them you just don't get to know at all, and they're just killed straight away. And I think the longer form kind of TV show, where like a Lost style show where 10 people show up on a weird kind of planet unannounced and they have to survive for 10 hours, I think it would be a pretty interesting story, and I'm sure they could keep the action and the tension just as valid. And this is a strong recommend from me.
Interesting. I like that idea. All right, awesome.
Thank you. So what are we watching next week, Cory?
So next week, we're at the end of the road, at least for now, and we're getting into 2012's Prometheus.
And keep in mind, we'll be revealing what our next series will be next week too, won't we?
Mm-hmm. We've made a decision.
We have made a decision, yes.
So if you want to be joining us and you want to know what we're getting into next,
let's just say DVDs have been bought. So that's it for this episode of the Rewatch Podcast. Keep up with listener interaction by joining our Facebook page at facebook.com/Rewatch Podcast. Follow the show on Twitter at RewatchPod, and visit our webpage rewatchpodcast.podomatic.com.
And as always, you can write us an email or record a voice message and send it to the rewatchpodcast@gmail.com. And also, if you've enjoyed the show, please consider giving us a rate and review on iTunes. And if you really want to go above and beyond, you can help support the Rewatch Podcast by heading to patreon.com/rewatchpodcast and make a monthly contribution as little as $1. And of course, we're also up on YouTube, so just search Rewatch Podcast and subscribe today. You'll get every single episode we've ever put out right there on YouTube.
With pretty pictures too.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me again this week, Nathan.
Thanks, Cory.
And I would just say, until next time, this is my summer home. I winter in the Riviera.
Someone put us on this rock. There's got to be a way off it.
The Rewatch Podcast is not associated with the copyright holders of these films, and no copyright infringement is intended. The use of any and all copyrighted material is only for parody, news analysis, critique, or educational purposes as provided in Title 17, aka Fair Use. Music provided by Kevin McCloud at incompetech.com. Copyright 2016, The Rewatch Podcast. Hi, Rewatch Podcast listeners. I'm Cory.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Nathan.
First off, let me say that we have all had a blast doing the Rewatch Podcast. Every week, we put out another episode for free for you. And although we enjoy these discussions with each other, we truly do this for you guys out there in podcast land.
That's right, Cory. But we are here today to tell you about Patreon. Every week, there are costs involved in podcasting about film and television, including hosting and bandwidth charges, our own personal internet usage, and film or show rentals and purchases. So, we're asking you to become a Patreon supporter.
If you can afford as little as $1 to throw our way per month, it would really help us keep the lights on. And if you want to send $100 our way every month, we wouldn't turn that down either. But it's your choice, and we appreciate the support you bring.
As always, we strive to bring you the best quality shows we can create, and we hope that you enjoy them. So head on over to patreon.com/Rewatch Podcast to become one of our patrons and show your support for the Rewatch Podcast.
And if we get enough patrons, we may even be able to produce exclusive content just for the supporters in the form of simply getting episodes before the main feed release, or even bonus film discussion episodes as a thank you for your support. The website again is patreon.com/Rewatch Podcast.
Thanks, everyone.